That's me at age 12. I'm Victor Torres, and this is my story. By the age of 12, I was already in trouble with the law. It was on these streets where my life was being shaped. Every day I was getting into trouble. I was fighting my way into school and out of school.
In the 60s, Victor moved from Puerto Rico to Brooklyn, New York with his family in search for the American dream. But that dream soon turned into a nightmare.
By age 14, I had already tried heroin and I got hooked on the drug. And by the age of 18, I had already been incarcerated 3 times.
He started to run around with some boys that he met. He started to spend less and less time at home with the family.
Victor's mother began to feel as if something was very wrong, not only for her son, but for the whole family. Now they are living with the realization that gangs ruled the streets.
I joined a gang called the Roman Lords because I thought that would give me identity or protection.
Gang life wasn't just a brotherhood, but it created an atmosphere for brutal violence and horrendous crimes. It also demanded loyalty, even unto death.
By the 1960s, drugs became so famous and so powerful that it was controlling everybody. Even the gang life was being controlled by heroin addiction.
That's when my mom, we started questioning her, what's wrong with Victor? And she sat us down in the living room and she said, your brother is into drugs. He is what you call a heroin addict.
The satisfaction of feeling good had now turned into pain that could only be relieved with the next shot of heroin. Victor overdosed and came close to death 3 times.
It was during this time that my mother had heard about a small church in the neighborhood, and she brought that faith to our house. She brought God to our home.
While Victor walked the streets, his mother was back home praying every day that God would protect him and change his heart.
My life had gotten so desperate that I thought that I was going to end up like many of my friends that were already dying of overdose with heroin. But it was during this time that my mother had heard about a home that this preacher by the name of David Wilkerson had opened up to help drug addicts and gang members.
His mother did not tell him that we were a faith-based, Christ-centered program. And so she said they have a different and new kind of cure, which turns out to be true.
It was at the Teen Challenge Center where Victor received help and encouragement from David Wilkerson, the author of the best-selling book, The Cross and the Switchblade, based on his ministry reaching gangs and drug addicts.
And on the 3rd day, I was so desperate, I decided that I was going to leave the home. And that's when another young man stepped in and he stopped me at the door and he started to preach to me and he told me that I had given everything else a chance in life and why not try God. And I turned from that door and I walked back into the building, into the house, and got on my knees for the first time. And I asked God to come into my life, to help me. And at that moment, I began to sense something that I had never experienced before.
I thought it was just no hope for him. So when I saw him on his first pass, it was like I couldn't believe it was him. He had gained weight. He looked so handsome, and he was the brother that I knew before.
Victor had a radical encounter with God. He felt a calling to help others and joined the team to open up a new center in Boston. Years later, after the death of David Wilkerson in 2011, his son Greg read Victor's autobiography and was inspired to make a movie about his struggles with gangs, heroin addiction, and his mother's faith to overcome. The movie was filmed at Fox Studios in Hollywood.
Nothing good can come here.
I'm praying for your brother. God made Victor for a purpose, and it was not drugs. No! Victor! I love you, Victor. And there's nothing you can ever do to change that.
People often ask me after they watch the movie, what happened after Boston? Tell us the story.
In 1963, Victor attended the Latin American Bible Institute in California, where he met his lovely wife Carmen. After graduation, they traveled to over 38 countries and all over the U.S., preaching the gospel and bringing hope to thousands of broken lives. In 1971, while on a preaching tour, they arrived in Richmond, Virginia. By now, their first daughter, Feliza, had been born. Suddenly, their tour was canceled, and Carmen thought that it would be a good idea to stay in Richmond and call Virginia their home.
Carmen and I were not sure that we should stay in Richmond, Virginia. Often we would argue whether we should remain here or not.
Because why should God bring us here to Richmond, Virginia for one appointment and then cancel everything else? Of course, he will say that I was tired of the road, and I will say, no, I don't know English. I don't know this town. I never heard about it. I know this is the place.
I decided to try it out for myself. I picked up my Bible and went down to the streets, and I stopped at a place called The Back Door. It was a nightclub filled with young people. And when I started to speak, I suddenly realized that there was a crowd that was surrounding me. And a young man who stood out, and when I made the call, he was the first one that came forward. The street where I started to preach is called Gray Street.
The young man who came forward and received Christ had issues with the law and drugs. Victor took him into his personal home. He became the first of many others to come, giving birth to the New Life for Youth ministry. Soon, the small house was crowded with young men. Victor and Carmen's second daughter, Rosalinda, was born.
I can remember when our family began to take young people off the street. Men and women would come into our home, and we literally gave up our beds.
There was a need for additional space, and finances were scarce. But then God performed a great miracle and provided a big house for the ministry. Victor's family continued to grow with the arrival of their daughter Michelle and son Victor, and so did the ministry. More and more young men and women who they called students came desperate for help, and every bed was full.
That big house, as the years went by, it was not enough. The Lord gave us a dream. I heard him say clearly, I will give you land, plenty of land, to bring my children off the streets, to nourish them physically and spiritually.
A man who owned a 118-acre ranch, after learning about New Life for Youth, was moved with compassion and agreed to sell it with no interest and affordable payments. After time, the house on the ranch was expanded to receive more young men. Shortly thereafter, a church was built in Richmond. It became a place of restoration for the student and their families and a place of worship for the community. With the continuous growth of the ministry, in 2003, it was time to build a larger sanctuary.
I have a calling to continue the work that my mom and dad started. In fact, my husband and I, we lead together, and every day Our life is engaged with people that are broken and hurting, but we know that Jesus is the answer. We know that they can find hope in Jesus.
New Life for Youth is composed of several facilities. We operate a house that is called the Mercy Home. This is where we receive women that are addicted to drugs. And we house about 25. And then we have another home that we call the Mercy Mom's Home. And this is where women with children come in. When they come to the home, they're able to receive the right help. And then we have the New Life Ranch. And the New Life Ranch is where we have about 60 men. Overall, we house over 200 young men and young women that we are helping all year round.
New Life for Youth is a one-year residential program offering an optional 6-month leadership training for those called to help others. Graduation from the program marks a new beginning for the students, equipping them to become productive members of society.
People say, how do you do everything that you do for 46 years and now you provide so many beds and the meals and everything that you do? And I let them know that it is an act of faith. God provides week by week and through good-hearted people that believe in the vision.
We help them in many different ways. First of all, it's a faith-based program, so we really rely on the Bible to teach them the principles and the things that they need to apply to their lives to really have long-lasting change. We also have our vocational training program. We actually own a thrift store and a car wash, and of course we have a lot of home maintenance projects where these young men and women can actually learn a skill or a trade. And because we have so many relationships with several businesses in the area, many of our students actually get jobs coming right out of the program.
I am fruit of this ministry. One of the things I recognize, I think that the ministry has worked with at least 20,000 plus people. The rate of success and longevity is supernatural. It instills a confidence that the world can't give you.
Victor has dedicated more than 50 years of his life together with his wife Carmen and family, reaching broken lives. And the testimonies speak for themselves.
If I didn't have the money, I would have broke into somebody's house or I robbed somebody.
I went to the gas station, I went to pay and came out, and New Life for Youth's outreach program was there and handed me a pamphlet. God spoke to me right then and said, this is where your son needs to be.
I've graduated New Life for Youth, and the doors is steady opening and opening and opening for me. I got a job with a godly man.
This boy came from the depths of nothing, and God has raised him.
He's a new person. He is, as we say, he is a new creation. It feels wonderful to have my Matthew back.
Every day I had to figure out where the money was going to come from. I used my friends, I stole from people. I really lived like an animal. I felt the Holy Spirit. I felt God tugging at my heart. Everything that was sick and wrong just fell out of me.
And I can remember making a phone call to my mother, and she answered the phone and she said, Junior, is this you? I said, yes, ma'am, how'd you know? She said, God told me. I said, Mom, I'm tired. She said, Leon, do you have that brochure from that program? And I said, yes, Mom, I do. I have it right here in my hand. When I first got there, I didn't know what to think. But then one night, a guy named Tom Watson introduced me to Jesus Christ at the side of the bed. And from that point on, I've not looked back. God really gave me a new life at New Life.
I was sexually abused by my grandfather. I didn't know what love was. I had abandonment issues, and I was shooting up everything. From that point on, it was heroin, I would even shoot up antidepressants when I didn't have nothing else. The program, they give me stability. I have people that love me. They showed me true love. I learned skills that I never knew before. And my husband is at the New Life Ranch. We've rebuilt our relationship. We have communication. We now are learning how to love our children in the proper way.
One day, a friend of mine who I used to do robberies with got shot in the face. As I was looking at him, my dad just came up to me and said, if you don't change, you next. There was like 10 guys around me and said, brother, we're gonna pray. And of course, I was like, pray? I need some methadone. They asked me to give my life to the Lord, and I tell you what, I didn't have no pain after that. I didn't go through 1 minute of withdrawal. A pharmaceutical plant hired me, and I would pack out 55-kilo methadone drums, and I would say to the Lord sometimes, you got a sense of humor.
By the time that I was 16, I was on cocaine and heroin. When I got out of jail, I started messing up again, and I heard about New Life for Youth. And being there has changed my life so dramatically. I am such a better person. I'm a strong, confident woman now.
Thousands have been transformed by the power of God through New Life for Youth and the vision of Victor Torres. But the need is greater today than ever before.
Heroin is on an extreme rise. Overdoses are extremely high, as well as the fact of fatalities involved in heroin use. We have to find alternative ways to be able to address this epidemic that's nationwide.
Opiates, both prescription and street drugs, like heroin, is now the main cause of accidental deaths in the USA. More than 50,000 lives are lost each year because of drug addiction. If we can reach one more life, this is the vision of New Life for Youth. I believe that together we can save one more life!
If you or someone you love is suffering from addiction or want to contribute, visit newlifeforyouth.com.